Michael Lewis, welcome to the Bases Project and welcome to Bases 92.
Thank you.
So you've produced this wonderful book and we'll just have a quick look at it. We will focus on the book. They're Conclusions of a Parapsychologist with Michael Lewis. And there you are holding it up on the screen.
Yes.
So you've been in the UFO business a long time, but you've been attending lots of UFO lectures, lots of presentations, but I mean, you've always been attending things and doing very important work, but really, what have you been doing? Would you belong to a particular organization of some kind?
Well, there are not many left now. There's Malcolm Robinson's SPI, Strange Phenomena Investigations. He's carrying the torch at the moment, but of course, before is largely a broken reed, so to speak. It was wound up. I went to the meeting that wound it up, and the people running it at present are running it as an internet club, so it isn't really doing very much. I'm still a member of ASAP, the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena, which has been going for 20 years or so. That is now the government regulator, and they're supposed to regulate investigators such as me. I do have an official card. And then if I don't follow the code of conduct, you can report me. But of course, the snag with that is that quite a lot of these groups are not an accredited investigator for ASAP. And therefore ASAP says they're outside our jurisdiction. So,
well, this is very, very, very important because the organisation that I was involved with had a few issues on that regard. I don't want to go too far down the line on that, but I was also before many years at the very start. But how did that actually start? How do people get accredited, and how does that actually work?
Well, they have several training courses which I've been on. You start off with a basic course, and I used to do interviewing when they ran it in London. It teaches you what to do and what not to do, and there's now a code of ethics. You have to the first thing to do is to decide whether you're dealing with a vulnerable person. And should they be referred to some kind of appropriate agency?
Now, this is really important. I mean, how do you determine what qualifications do you have to be? If you could look a little bit further up, I know you've got maybe to look at me down, but if you could look at more at your camera, it would be better. What exactly qualifies somebody for that? Because one of the investigations that we've found is that the psychological system in this country is basically jerry-rigged against anybody who is telepathic, psychic, or any of these things. You immediately get sectioned. So, I mean, what do you call an accredited investigation or whatever?
For an example, we have one lady who is well known to both of us, and she was immediately identified by me as a vulnerable person, and they had threatened her with sectioning. And so I proceeded very carefully and looked into all aspects and decided that she was quite sane. And as you say, if she carried on like she was doing, they'd simply lock her up. So I steered her away from that quite successfully, and I've been dealing with this lady now for several years. I'm not getting very far because of the nature of what we're dealing with. She's what you would call a targeted individual.
Now explain what that all is. I mean, okay, we're dealing with terms which are sort of well known and bandied about. What is officially a targeted individual, and what is officially an abductee, or who's bonkers and who isn't bonkers, who is targeted, and what about MK Ultra and all these kind of mind control programs that we hear about? So officially, what's
yes,
what?
I've heard a lot about this from you, but with due respect from you, it's only when I began to investigate these cases and interview these people that I realised that what you were telling us was quite true. But I found this out on the ground with an actual person, and it's quite frightening what we've discovered. Targeted individual means that they are being watched by the security services. Mind control does come into it, and MK Ultra. You've also got MILABs, which, as far as I'm concerned, MILABs is a few pieces in a big jigsaw puzzle, and I can make a few of the MILABs pieces fit together, but I don't know enough about the background to what I'm dealing with to be able to see how MILABs fits into everything.
Well, I suppose if you've got a situation where aliens or demons or something's taking members of the public, it's sensible for the military to take them to find out what's going on. But at the same time, there's an ulterior motive in the first place, like the super soldier program, where there's some kind of secret program going on involving a lot of stuff, and maybe it's all gone wrong and the whole thing's a bloody mess. But, I mean, things are moving on this.
We have got actually a super soldier. I run a small practice with 2 colleagues in Barnet, and we have found all the things that you were talking about, which really is very interesting.
So what? I mean, super soldier is a term that was sort of used for marketing a conference or a get together in the States. What, in your terms, is a super soldier? Because there's different versions. It doesn't mean you can scale tall buildings and fly around and lift things or whatever. So what is the official term?
You, Miles, for that. It is as you say. We've got somebody who's been in the military and he's got a job of sorts, and we've discovered that he does go off, as you say, and bump people off. Basically, he has attacked another client of mine, and we cottoned onto this and blocked him. But he had made her very ill indeed.
So is there, without obviously going into individual names, obviously, and we must be very careful, we don't want to do that.
No.
What is involved with this?
What is involved? Well, I think there are these people around who get called up, and I don't know what it's basically. I think mind control, MK Ultra, that sort of thing. And they fly off to somewhere and bump somebody off and come back, or in this case, they use some form of mind control to make their victim very ill. I mean, we do know that the military have got voice to skull equipment technology.
Yeah, V2K, I think it's sort of known as.
And of course, then they hear voices and begin to get very worried, and of course, then they get locked up.
And that's called gaslighting. I think the film Gaslighting, which George, what's his name? James Mason was a way of exploiting that term.
Yes, indeed.
So before we get off the official, this is a difficult subject because a lot of people in this field are basically amateurs and they're doing it part-time, and they're doing, I know that Tony Dodd, the late Tony Dodd, did have a bit of a problem with an abductee where I think there was a possible court case involved. I mean, the thing about an investigator is they want to find out what's going on, but that can end up re-traumatizing the person who's gone through the trauma because they're reliving it to tell the investigator. So how do we get the information without re-traumatizing the individuals and causing a lot of problems for that individual?
Well, I've not actually had an abductee to deal with, but I think the answer would be hypnotic regression.
Now, how does somebody get hypnotized without being re-hypnotized into something else, which is basically done by a charlatan or somebody of nefarious? I mean, there has been issues where I've been dealing with where the individual investigator has actually got an agenda against the abductees or the contactees or whatever they've been traumatized with.
Well, it's very difficult to. I mean, I haven't had much experience with this hypnosis. I would have to get somebody that was well known, and I would have to take into account the effect on the abductee. But a lot of people do claim to be an abductee. To give you an example, I attended a local spiritualist church circle meeting, and when it was revealed that I was interested in UFOs, a perfectly ordinary lady, nothing weird or didn't come out of a lot of mad things or anything like that at all, said very casually, I was abducted when I was a child and they've been abducting me ever since. And I can't talk about it because they'll lock me up. People will think I'm mad. Now, I can't think that that's the only person in that position. The trouble is that people don't want to tell of their experiences because they're fearful of what will happen to them down here, and probably because the abductors have told them not to reveal anything. I mean, during my near-death experiences, I was sworn to secrecy, and I said, well, there's a lot of my colleagues, you for example, who'd be really interested in all this, and they said, well, if you start talking about it, you'll either get bumped off or you'll get locked up. And in fact, I had a phone by my bed, hospital bed, and I was actually going to ring MI5 and say, yeah, do you know what's just happened to me? But I thought better of it. I think the best advice there is to keep your head below the parapet and not come to the attention of organisations like MI5.
I mean, surely they're involved anyway. I mean, this whole thing about no defence significance is because they're involved.
Well, I take the view that I'm not doing anything wrong because they're of no defence significance. But as you know very well, went way back in the early days of before, we were told, and I've no idea, I can't remember now what the basis was, but they said something like 80% of MI5's budget was spent on ufology and ufologists. And when the Irish Troubles started quite a while ago now, it was said that they needed a bigger budget and needed to recruit a lot of agents to deal with it because they were so busy with UFOs.
I am aghast at that, to be honest. I mean, I find that absolutely amazing. That
well, I did too, yes.
But I mean, it also indicates that there's a hell of a lot of this going on.
Well, there is, yes. Indeed. I mean, all the stuff you uncover, the secret services are heavily involved, as they are with my client.
So, getting back to your official organisation, I mean, how does it publicize itself so people can get accredited? Is there a procedure where people apply and get accredited and have this
Yes,
badge or whatever?
you join ASAP, and then you become an investigator. And when you've got enough experience, or while you're training, you go on the first course, then you go on an advanced course, and then you have to pass an exam and get a referee, and then you get your card.
And does this cost? How much does this cost? I mean, what's involved? And
Oh, ASAP is a charity, and they do charge only the minimum to cover their costs. So costs wouldn't be a factor in it. It's not one of these several £1,000s with some guru course. It's very practical and very scientific. The main thing is to ensure that vulnerable people are protected, and that you follow a code of ethics.
now, does that require you to take lots of notes? I know that therapists and healers, they have to display a certificate, and they have to take records, and about a third of the course is all about legal stuff.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I don't keep records on the computer, and that solves a lot of problems.
Ah, what do you mean by that?
Well, under this data protection business, you have to register with the data protection registrar and pay a fee. It wasn't very much, but I suspect it's gone up now. So I don't keep anything on the computer, and that avoids it all.
Well, I think that's sensible also about hacking. What about that?
Well, there's nothing on my computer that they can hack. It's a card index.
Right, exactly. No, that's the point. Because that's one of the things that we discover. Okay. So I was actually amazed when you mentioned that you with before that we had a situation where you recommended hypnosis.
Well, you see, when I first started off in ufology, we only had these wonderful cases in the States. I remember Lionel Beer saying, the trouble with this is it's happening over there, but not over here, in typical Lionel fashion.
Yes.
And when we discovered that it was happening over here, and that regressive hypnosis came in, up to that time, it was always said that you couldn't lie under hypnosis, and therefore everybody got very excited. And then before, which has acknowledged, by the way, that it was not exactly controlled, but MI5 was the handler of before, if you like.
Yeah, we all know that. I mean, we got was one phone number actually you were reporting straight to MI5 when you reported to before. That was the...
Well, what can you say? And before I was told, look, you can't say this is true, and before then brought in its famous ban on hypnosis and said, because it was said, scientists or psychologists have now decided that you could fantasize when you're under hypnosis. And I immediately recognised that was they were stopping before from getting anywhere. And subsequent to the winding up of before, it was admitted that if they got a really good case, they kept it under wraps. So...
Well,
yes.
I've heard recently, very recently, that the Chinese are taking control of this situation. They've announced in Moscow in the last, I don't know, month or 2 or 3 months that they're going to actually push for the resurrection of the resolution done by I think President or Prime Minister Kerry of Grenada. I think it's Resolution 51. I think.
Yes, I remember him. Yes.
and they've got 25 nations already. They only need another 5, and they're going to push for the full disclosure, proper disclosure, and it ain't going to include the UK or the USA because we've screwed up on this. What about that? I don't think they said that. I'm saying that because of what you just are saying. If you get a good case, don't talk about it.
Yes, yes. Yes, that's very true. You see this all over the place. There was the Berwyn Mountain case. There was one a nurse who lived in a cottage they were dotted about the hillsides, who was in a position to view the landing site and actually saw the light when the UFO landed, and there were people around it. And UFO investigators made a big deal of this, and the nurse was subjected to such harassment by telephone calls, men in black and all the rest of it, and pressurised not to say anything. Eventually she emigrated and went to live in New Zealand to get away from it all.
Which unfortunately probably didn't get away from it at all.
Well, I don't know, but the military descend en masse and block everything off and say it's an exercise and all the rest of it. I mean, the Penturk incident, which you're no doubt familiar with, is an absolute classic. The military were waiting for this UFO. One helicopter caught fire. The whole thing is as plain as a pikestaff. It's not a conspiracy theory. The evidence is there.
Well, for those who are not familiar with that, let's go through a few cases and let's talk about that. Well,
you see, people say, "Oh, there's no evidence and it will be reported." Well, it isn't reported because the press. There's a consensus an agreement that you don't report anything of a UFO nature because it might upset people. Well, they always say that whenever there's something to conceal, we don't want people to know because they might be upset.
I think the people who are going to be upset are the people in charge. You need to kick up the ass to get on with this because we've got a serious situation here.
It is a serious situation, and the fact the military are waiting for this UFO, which is perfectly obvious from the account of the investigators, they must know, they must have some contact.
Exactly, yeah. They're into it they're right up to their necks in it. That's why they don't want anybody to know how much they're being betrayed and they're being double deals and God knows what else going on. I can say that, but I don't know if you can say it.
Well, yes, I would agree. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I only go on facts, and the facts are there for all to see, and plain as a pikestaff.
Well, continue with the cases. What about Rendlesham? I mean, there's been lots of incidents after that, before that, all sorts of stuff.
Well, without getting involved in the post-Rendlesham controversy, I'm not going to name any names here, but I was at the before...
Well, I'll say that. I'd say that Colonel Holt was brought in to handle the case, mishandle it, and make sure the British witnesses were basically pushed away and pushed out of the way, and the Americans did it, took it, and canned it.
You could be right, but if you... Jenny Randall's announced it before that Art Wallace was a whistleblower who could tell us what happened. And of course, we all know that was a pseudonym for Larry Warren. And it doesn't really matter who Larry Warren was or what he was supposed to have done. He was the person, by one means or another, who brought this case out to
Absolutely. I remember listening to him on before Coast to Coast became Coast to Coast. I remember listening to him on Art Bell, and and also at the Sheffield conference, he gave the Sunday Times reporter a extremely detailed account of what happened. And I had my camera sitting there, and I didn't switch it on because I respected I'm a complete idiot. Turn the damn camera on. You can argue about the recording afterwards. But what he told the Sunday Times was absolutely amazing. And that
Yes.
was when the so-called alien autopsy thing was being shown at before. But I mean, he kept that case going, and he's taken hell for it.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it doesn't matter what he got up to subsequently in his life. I'm not interested in that. It's his life. It's nothing to do with me. I'm a ufologist. I'm only interested in Rendlesham. Yet, whenever I look at Facebook, which I do sometimes, all I see is diatribes against him based on his subsequent career. Well, that's nothing to do with me. And it's nothing to do with respect to the people who are bad-mouthing him.
Well, I got an interview with Colonel John B. Alexander at the UFO Congress when it moved to Laughlin, and it was just closing, and it was a bit of a rush. And he explained there was a similar incident a year before, and there were other incidents like that, and they were just put up on a shelf too hot to handle.
If it wasn't for Art Wallace, which was a pseudonym, we wouldn't have known about this. He might well have thought, I might get some money out of this, and he might well have claimed other witnesses' accounts as his own. It doesn't matter. He's the one that bought it out. I think you're quite right. Yes, that probably wasn't the only occasion that something happened, but of course they're all told to be quiet.
Well, what about other events? Sheffield incident. I mean, Max Briley Burns. He took a hell of a kicking on that. He was jailed. His reputation trashed.
Well, he was jailed for drugs offences. And again, I would say it doesn't really matter to us as ufologists. We're ufologists, not drug dealers.
Well, he told me, Michael, that he had two girls with him. He picked up at the disco. He was a DJ. They stopped the car on the motorway, threw the drugs into the seat, took the two girls out, and says, "Right, you're nicked." And then the judge at the court case says, "You will instruct this man as guilty." As simple as that.
Well, could be, but it's not really for me to comment on Max Burns and the drug offences for which he was jailed. But I want to concentrate on the Sheffield incident.
Yes, exactly.
One of the contactees, it might have been Sabrina Piper or Sasha Christie, was told to drive to the area when it had been sealed off. If you remember, that they told this at an AMMACH conference.
Yes.
So there must be something in it.
Absolutely.
And whenever you get an incident like this, the authorities always clamp down, seal off the area, and you never hear about it in the press.
Well, I remember when I went up there with Max to do some recordings, and we were followed. We're all over the bloody place. We're crawling around after us, right on the dam and everything else, and it's really interesting.
Yes, indeed.
So so you published a book. Let's put the book up because that's always interesting. I've got the book. I've got a slide of the book. Michael Lewis, Conclusions of a Parapsychologist.
Yes.
And you can get it at. I'll leave that up that slate so people can see how to get it.
It's on Amazon, and you can get it here. It's published by Balboa Press, which is a subsidiary, I think, of Hay House in the States.
Oh, that's good.
And it only costs, well, it's in dollars, so it varies, but in England I sell it for £8.50. It's a readable book, not very long, and it's written as a popular book, not a weighty tone for serious ufologists. It's a weighty, it's not that, it's an easy read book, and it's not very long, so I'm hoping that people will be interested enough to buy a copy and read it.
Well, I noticed on the cover You got flying saucers, which you'd all expect, but you've also got ghosts and gravestones and a crow.
It covers ghosts, my own experiences in them, crop circles, and quite a few other things. I also added a chapter on predictions after my near-death experiences because that showed me that there are things called timelines which I didn't even know about. It's been said that we're in a computer simulation or a computer game, and if one of your players, you or me for example, is in a dire situation, they will switch the timeline, switch you onto another timeline, and that is what I think makes predictions so impossible to predictions you can't predict, because somebody will move the wickets.
Now, this is really fascinating. I mean, timelines, you mentioned, could you go into the detail of each one of those things? Because that's a lot of stuff in one sentence.
Indeed so. I mean, I thought, well, I paid no attention whatsoever to timelines, and then found that they really existed. So this was a big step for me.
How did you find that out? How do you find a timeline, and how do you find another timeline to know there's two or more than one or three or four?
I can't. But I did actually die and was dead for a day. And I said to the angels, there are angels, they were there. I was talking to them like I'm talking to you. And I said, I'll have to go back. And they said, well, you've got work to do. We'll have a go, which I didn't find very encouraging, because they said it might work. And they switched me from the timeline where I'd been dead for a day to another timeline where the psychic surgery which had been done on me worked. They repaired. I had two. Well, we've all got two heart valves. Both failed, and I had pneumonia and one or two other things equally fatal. And this is a well-known way of dying. You don't recover from.
Well-known way of dying. Yeah. But could you just start looking up a bit higher in the camera? It's good. Okay, so this is something which we've had quite a bit of experience of. People dying and then coming back. Mary Helen Hinesley lectured at the Open Minds Conference only a couple of days ago, or a week ago or so, and she explained about her. She died in a car crash. Another brilliant woman called I forget, she's an Irish woman actually. She's spoken at the Basis Conference in Dublin last September. Yes, she died. Max Spears died and came back and then died again. Very inconvenient. John Irwin was brought through the process of death as part of his military training with an ET because they were getting ancient secrets from humanity and how to do interdimensional portal stuff.
Yes.
It seems to be a common thread here. So what exactly happened with yourself?
Well, they said it. I said I couldn't go back because too much would have deteriorated, biological cellular deterioration in 24 hours. So they said you'll have to live the day you died again, but with a different outcome. And I thought, this is getting a bit beyond me. And they said it's like a chocolate factory where the chocolates go along a conveyor belt, and one machine puts chocolate over the filling, and another machine puts a sugar star on or something. And say that you miss the chocolate coating machine, will take you off the production line, walk you back, put you on the production line again before the machine, the chocolate machine, you get to that. And then when you get the chocolate machine, it will put chocolate on you and you'll come out as a proper chocolate. That's how they explained it to me. So I thought, wow. I came back through, shall we say, a revered biblical, what shall I say, not Holy Grail, but an object that's very well known, and biblical scholars, both Jewish and Christian, have studied this for years and tried to work out what this revered religious sacred object was. And I have to say that none of them have got anywhere near the truth.
You couldn't tell us. Nobody else is. You could tell me. We won't tell anybody else. You could whisper it if you want.
Well, I better not, because I think that would upset a lot. Well, it might not, but I don't know how the religions would react.
Well, I think they're all changing now. I'm going to put my serious voice. They're all changing. Lots of things happening.
But I'm not telling you to. And I came back, and my body was quite cold, like getting into wet clothes, just like that. And I thought, oh, this isn't very nice.
Well, as Tim Refat says, it's like wetware.
Yeah, I had to relive the day again, and eventually I cottoned on to what was going on, and I knew what people were going to do. And my wife brought me in the Telegraph, and I looked at it and I said, well, I'm not to myself, I read this yesterday, which of course I had, and I pretended to read it, knowing full well what it had in it. And then I was waiting for the chap in the next bed to say, have you finished the paper, Michael? And it was like an actor following a script. It's just amazing. And I've always been a bit conservative with a small c, of course, in what I believed and didn't. But one of my main conclusions from this was that I could understand a lot of what you were saying, whereas previously I'd just been puzzled by it, and I couldn't really take in what you were saying. But I think my message to people would be follow Miles Johnson, because he's on the right track. And that I was right, of course, in that, because they tried to bump you off on the plane to Ireland.
Well, so, hopefully, I mean, that's nice to hear, but we're not on a very good track here. It's not very nice what's going on with the world.
It isn't. You're quite right. And when I found out that what I previously regarded as a nonsense is to some extent perfectly true, I'm horrified. I mean,
so what do you feel is going to be the best way to deal with this situation? How do we move forward on this?
It's difficult, because as soon as you get to the truth, you get targeted and they try to bump you off.
Well, that certainly never happened on this organisation. How do we fight back then?
Well, I get a lot of problems with clients. We clear all sorts of things. I work with the angels. Metatron has appeared to me and said we can work together. So I call him in when I get anything like MILABs or targeted individuals, and get him to clear it. He appears to be the only angel that can deal with that. So it is very serious, but I'm just an ordinary person down here struggling with things that are difficult for me to understand, but I'm up against powers that are not earthly, and they're far more knowledgeable and powerful than me. And a few days later, or a few weeks later, the client will ring up and say, oh, it's all come back. And, I had that happen last night, and we've decided to repeat what we did before in the hope it'll work. people are mind controlled to a very great extent. I mean, people say that, oh, well, Mars says everyone is. Well, I'd be inclined to say, well, Mars is right from my own experience. And there are a lot of dodgy people about. I won't mention any names, but certain very well-known names keep cropping up. Well, I better not say any more because they might realise who I'm talking about. One very well-known guru who regularly advertises told a patient of mine to come for an appointment at 11 o'clock. When she said, right, I'll see you tomorrow morning, he said, no, PM, not AM. Now, I mean, would you go to see somebody who only had appointments 11 PM? That ought to ring a very loud bell. And what they're doing is this is human beings. They want to control people, impress them with their clairvoyance, and then they make them literally slaves. They have them doing all the housework, the washing up, everything, the shopping, and they become human slaves. And I had no idea that this was going on, but it is. And of course, the people themselves who are doing this we inevitably find using spirit release therapy, which is a branch of psychiatry, by the way, that they've got somebody influencing them to a great extent, because it depends what terminology you care to use. If I have a Muslim patient, it's probably a jinn, but Muslims know all about jinns. But English people don't. They think it's all a load of religious nonsense. Well, it isn't, I can assure you.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, at what point are we dealing with aliens, so-called ETs, and what point are we dealing with demonic entities, and what point are we dealing with a sort of terrestrial energetic structure like the Fae?
Yeah, you get all of them.
So could you list that? Could you explain that?
Well, I mean, the Fae, the fairy kingdom, which everyone just laughs at, it was suggested they were responsible for a problem I had with my hearing aid, which I'm not wearing at the moment. I was sitting here like I am now, and the hearing aid behind the ear fell down, clonk, on the plastic rug I've got underneath. So I bent down to pick it up. That's funny, it's not there. And I thought, oh, this is the usual, you drop something on the floor and you can never find the bloody thing. So I got up and searched everywhere and it simply wasn't there. So I've got lots of computer wires like you have. And of course, if you've dropped something on a computer wire, it drops down in between and you have to shake the wires and have a good search. And that is what I did 3 times. I went through every wire, and you'll know what I mean with the wires you've got. Massive wires. I went through the whole lot, fingertip search, and I looked behind the computer everywhere. Simply wasn't there, and all it done was fallen about 2 feet onto the carpet by my left foot. And I said, there's something very odd going on here. And being in ASAP, I said, if this reappears, they'll say that I didn't search properly. So I did a fingertip search, like a policeman after there's been a crime, and it simply wasn't there. And I got my wife to have a look, and she couldn't find it. And eventually I had to go to the hospital and confess. And I paid 60 quid for a new hearing aid. I swear this is a true story. I came back from the hospital and my shaman colleague, the one who's qualified in psychiatry, came and plugged his computer into mine by my feet where I'm sitting now. And I said to him very sarcastically, because he was a showman, "You can't find my hearing aid. I think it must have been dematerialised by aliens," very sarcastically. And he just bent down. He plugged his computer, and he was rising again to his feet. So he just went straight to where I dropped it, picked it up and said, "Here you are," and collapsed a stout parapsychologist. I couldn't think of anything to say. I mean, he found it. I said, "Did you materialise it?" And he said, "No." And he just looked exactly where I dropped it, sitting on top of the wires, and picked it up. It was there. He saw it. He picked it up. He gave it to me. Now, I can't spend ages doing a fingertip search and miss a hearing aid, which is right where it's supposed to be. And I just paid 60 quid. How about that? And that, he reckoned, well, it could have been an alien, but I do have an alien with me, but it's a good one. But that's the kind of thing which people tell me the Fae people do. They must think that's hilarious.
Well, the researchers in Ireland, people disappeared. Literally, you're walking along and with a colleague in the forest, and then you're gone, and they say, "Oh, you're away with the fairies."
I know. That's the kind of thing that happens. You see, I was sitting in the pub the other day, as one does, having coffee, I may add, a very old pub, and a couple of people came in the front door. Mainly they come in the side door from the car park because it's out in the country. A couple of people came in, they pushed against the door closure, the device, and they pushed it open, and then they come in, and the door closer closes it. And I was sitting there having my coffee, and the door suddenly opened in exactly the same way as if somebody was pushing it. And I looked at it, and once it got nearly wide open, it stopped, and then the door closing device closed it. Now, there was a stiff breeze, but that was from the west into the back of the pub, not the front of the pub. It wouldn't, in my opinion, have been anywhere near enough to have blown the door open. And there was a little porch the other side as well. And I said, well, that must be a past local coming in for his morning drink. But I couldn't find anything in the history of the pub to indicate that it had a ghost. But it's always a different set of staff, so I don't think they'd be there long enough to realise something wasn't quite right. I wouldn't mind betting that isn't the only thing that happens in the pub. And spiritualists, I am a Christian spiritualist, and I've also developed mediumship. And I've become aware of all the spirits that are around us, and some of my colleagues in the church can see them. There is a lady who was the founder of the Barnet Church, we think, in very ancient clothes, and she sometimes opens the door, and people say, "Oh, the door opened," and there was nobody there. And she's obviously still interested in the church. They've also told me, this causes quite a bit of excitement, you'll be amused to hear that I have an alien with me. They say, "Oh, you're a nun, an Egyptian, North American," and all the rest of it. And an alien. And the
What type of alien? Grey or reptilian or what?
I think it's a grey, and they say it's a positive influence. It's not a negative, but it still causes problems when I go to spiritualist groups, and they say, "Oh, you've got an alien with you," and have to calm everybody down. And when I went to a client for a first visit, I was going to record some of my. It was a channeling from allegedly the Palladians that I'd done with Solara and Ra on Ibiza. And I brought it along, but I hadn't wiped the recording. And you know, those little tiny Olympus recorders have an on-off switch. You have to go. And I entered the living room, sat down, put the case on the floor. I hadn't said more than about a dozen words, and this recording of the Palladians started from my bag. So, in true ASAP fashion, I took it out, I examined it, and in front of everybody, I switched it off and said, well, it could have been that when in transit, the switch has got moved. I didn't really think that was the answer because it's quite tight. It's a stiff switch. And I said out loud, if the Palladians are here, will they please do that again? And I put it back in the case and zipped it up. And I doubt whether more than 5 seconds, that's probably an exaggeration, had elapsed. And the same thing happened again. The recording came on. So I said, thank you very much, yes. And I asked the lady whether she'd had any problems with aliens, and of course she had. And I felt that the alien, the Grey, who alleged was working for the Palladians and would help me with this case. And they did. They found the lady another nice place with good fires, but of course, as you all know, moving, if you're a targeted individual, doesn't really help matters because they just move with you.
What about this target individuals, this TI thing? I mean, it seems it's wherever people do move, they activate a local or gang stalkers. It's a hell of a nightmare. How do we deal with that?
All of those. How do you do that? Well, the lady had said they're in a house over there and what have you, and there's a special spot here. That's very suspicious. So I got out. I had an EMF meter and dowsing rods, and I used both, and they politely went round and doused where she said, and I was absolutely astonished because I thought, I'll soon disprove this, but no, the rods confirmed nearly all the places that she said, and the EMF in the spot near the front door actually gave a reading, and I was able to walk around and tap the flat and tell her exactly where the trouble spots were, which she knew. And gang stalking, yes, indeed, that features.
So how do the gang stalkers work? I mean, are they sort of are they sort of switched on in areas where you're on? There's some kind of transmission directly to them, or what?
Yes, from houses in the vicinity, and there appeared to be a number of spy agencies that work, CIA, MI5, and others as well, and they also, I was able to douse where they were. Well, that one's so and so, and the CIA over there. And I was really astonished at this because I thought, well, I want some evidence of this, and I got it.
Who are the others? Russians,
Sorry?
or the Germans, secret DVD, or the Chinese?
Yes. So obviously she is a person of great interest to them, and they're using all sorts of technology. Now this is a new...
I didn't use the Vatican there, the secret agent of the Vatican.
Probably. This is a new property that she's got there, and it's got a security system and a front door with quite sophisticated locks. Yet they seem to get in mainly in an etheric form, but also in a physical form. There was an occasion when a man came in.
What do you mean come in? Are you saying like
No, like you or me, a man, and he came.
materialized?
Well, I don't know. And he came in and walked around. And when she went downstairs, the front door was open. Now, I mean, what do you do in a case like that? I've told her to put a thread over the door because that's an old trick, but you can see whether it's been opened, of course.
Yeah.
And,
That just tells you they came into the door. But they can gate in, can't they? Materialize.
We feel there is a portal there because, I better not go into too much detail because I must respect the anonymity, but this person appears to be being surgically interfered with.
Right.
And when they do that, she's sick, she vomits, because that you don't have anything to eat before you have an operation, as you will know.
Yeah, right.
And then they put her out just like that. And then in the morning, she's got little red marks where they've operated or done something. And it's sore till midday, and then it goes.
That's but that would I mean have you heard of Delta Force? Delta
Yes.
nurses and things doing that?
Well, yes, I have heard of that, but it begs the question of how do they get in through a locked front door? It must be at a non-physical level that they get into the flat. And that if it's these Delta people, then they must have access to technologies beyond our dreams.
Well, when that happens, is there a temperature change? I mean, a sudden freezing, depending upon the energies of a different domain link in, there can be differences, and then your temperature can go down dramatically.
There are cold spots, yes. You see, I've tried all sorts of things and given her a lot of advice, but we keep having bright ideas and trying this and that and everything else, but we're dealing with a technology that's far beyond our understanding. If we could fathom out how they were doing it, we might be able to find some way of blocking it.
What about the Spirit Release Foundation? I mean, I've put a lot of people to get help from them because I think they have a network. You mentioned Spirit Release. I mean, is that something that would help people?
Well, it would where you've got a walk-in or a possession or something like that, but this is really in a different category. We're talking about both human and non-physical agencies interfering with people. That's rather different. I mean,
Is there anybody you can phone? Who do you phone, as they say?
Well, I mean, if it's a demon or I mean, I don't want to convey the impression that I some nut that deals with demons, but really we use the psychiatric terms, and we do a kind of, my colleague does a chart in which he using dowsing, and he goes down a chart and finds out this, that and the other, all sorts of things, soul fragments. They've had some trauma in the past, and usually I can deal with that sort of thing because I do the emotion code. We can help people like that, and as I say, this is a branch of psychiatry. I don't know about the Spirit Release Foundation. Are they in the States or are
No,
they?
they're in the UK. It's run Spirit Release Foundation. I think Sue Allen Therapies was involved with that, and she runs. I think she did a lot of stuff out of the College of Psychic Studies, and I know that she runs um, accredited training courses for healers and people of that
Yeah,
regard. But
see that we are healers, and we do try and remove these things, but in some cases they simply come back, and we do find that MILABS is at work in a number of instances. That is something we do look for.
what about the military? I mean, you're officially accredited. Can you not sort of pick up a phone and say, could this agency not do that or whatever?
ASAP isn't some kind of government stooge. They are a respectable scientific research organisation. It's really us monitoring ourselves and making sure that we behave in an ethical manner. It's not a case that the government controls ASAP. So the answer to that is no. I can refer it to ASAP, but they wouldn't know how to deal with MILABs and things any more than I do.
But is there any way of, for instance, in the future, getting some kind of an office that there's a number you can phone at MI5, look what's going on here, or MI6 or somebody, or the NSA, look...
We don't have any official contact with MI5. I always obey the law, even though it's stupid. Today they are trying the chap who discovered GMAF as a cancer remedy, alleged, I'd better say.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Are doing that today. I mean, this is ridiculous. But I don't have that. That's the attitude of the authorities: is keep it all under wraps. I don't have and don't want any contacts in MI5. I mean, yes, as you say, before I used to have a number, and they've now admitted it. But no is the answer to that. ASAP is not working for MI5.
Yeah, well, I think, is there any way of moving forward with these agencies, or do we basically have to bring in another kind of higher level police force, because there's obviously a lot of criminal activity going on here, abusing ordinary folk?
Yes, there is, and we've followed on. We've developed the SR, the Spirit Release Therapy, to the stage where we can usually remove troublesome attachments. A lot of them are just spirits who may not even realise, of human beings who've died, and may not even realise they've died. Alcohol is a particular factor here. They attach onto somebody, and we have one case where an alcoholic deceased relative had attached herself to a living member of the family and driven him to drink. And we even identified who it was. And we got rid of the lady, and then the living relative no longer had a desire to have a drink excessively. And the way you do it is that you have to invoke a higher power to do it. You must not do it yourself. And I would emphasise this for anyone watching this, is that you've got to be someone who's in contact with a higher power. Now, I trained under Doreen Virtue at Glastonbury, no less, and I was very impressed with her teachings and my own experiences. And I call in an archangel. I've already mentioned Metatron, who appeared to me on that course in a blinding light and said, "We can work together." And I was so scared I fell out my chair. And
as they say, fall off your trolley.
And you call in the appropriate angels. I've already said what metagen does. And I can visualize what they're doing, and the psychiatrist does his stuff, and then I ask the angels to come in, and then I ask them to do whatever is appropriate, and they come in, and a lot of it, spiritualists will recognise. You explain to them the situation, and you get the angels. You talk to the angels, not the patient, and they do what they think is appropriate. Usually, the attachment is amenable to going somewhere better, and off he goes, and that's it. And that does work. But once you get into millabs and targeted individuals, it's a completely different kettle of fish.
Have you dealt with any individuals who've got these sort of implants inside their head? That.
Oh, every time, yes. That's the first thing you look for.
And how do you look for that? I mean, this is a good thing. How do you find implants? How do you do that? What procedures do you have?
It's a chart which covers all aspects, including implants. And there's a section that relates to implants, and you douse whether the person has got any implants, who put them in, not necessarily millabs. And we call in an angel to dissolve them. And whilst that is quite successful, we see them next week, and blast it, they've been put back.
Now, are these things that you can see in MRI scans? I mean, there's been some individuals who've released MRI scans of their heads and things, which are very disturbing. It's great that that's been released into the public domain. But I mean, is there something like that you can work on?
Well, we can do. I mean, who's that? Stringfield is in the States. He's got a sweet jar of metallic shards that have been removed surgically from people. You've probably seen it at these conferences. But a lot of them are etheric, so they're not going to show up. Or if you persuade somebody to have them removed surgically, by the time they get round the operation, they're no longer there. These we're up against.
Yeah, they know that you're looking for them,
and then they put them back
disappear.
Again. We think the lady I mentioned has got quite a few implants, and that may be the reason for these pseudo-surgical exercises. I think we're guinea pigs in a sense. Abductees are looked at to see whether they how they're developing, with a view, I think, to refining the formula for creating the humans that they've created. And there's a breeding program going on when people have pseudo-pregnancies. Yes, you're pregnant, and then a couple of months later, that's funny, it's not there. We're guinea pigs in a way, and it's quite frightening. I find it horrific.
What about cyborgs, the sort of non-human cyborg units, dead people reanimated with technology added to them?
Not really something I've gone into, but given the program that's going on of refining our genetic structure, because a lot of our DNA is just switched off, as you know, and the theory is that if it was switched on, we would all see spirits and not succumb to these dreadful illnesses. And that is the program. There could be cyborgs, as you say. In fact, we are aware that walk-ins sometimes take over a dead or dying body. I don't want to frighten people; they don't get out of graves. But somebody dies in a hospital. I could be a walk-in, but I'm not. And they take over the body. The person is dies and goes off, and then they suddenly rally and start to talk to people again. But they could be what you call a cyborg. So it's possible. They've got the technology. They could do anything. We're mere guinea pigs.
Who is they?
Whoever is behind the MILABs, which would be intelligence agencies, the military trying to get the technology, aliens, goodness knows, you tell me. There's so many out there. I mean, Christ said, in our Father's house there are many mansions. If it were not so, would I have told you? I've just been handed a dinner's ready. Well, sorry.
Well, I think we've covered a heck of a lot, Michael. It's really good to see you, and I'll edit this afternoon, and hopefully it's actually stuck. And we've had so much trouble getting this together. It's good. It's magnificent to see you and the work that you're doing, and we'll see about getting that book. And it's a great book.
Yes, that's a very succinct and readable account of everything, designed to make people think. If they thought about all these things, well, I don't think they want to think too much because they might get alarmed, but at least they can stop laughing at us. That will be.
If people want to get hold of you, how do they do that?
I've got a website, Michael Lewis Therapies, all one word, .co.uk.
I think I've got some of that ready. I'll put those on the screen.
And that's got contact details. If people want to have entities removed, or they've got problems of that nature, then there are contact details. And I've got two colleagues, a Sikh who brings in Indian gods with some success, and a shaman who's trained in spirit release therapy. I'm trained in angel therapy, which is very useful for contacting the angels, and the emotion code, which releases trapped emotions, emotional traumas, which can cause physical problems. So that's basically what I do. The shaman also clears spaces of bad vibes and entities, and quite a bit of our work can be done remotely. So I think that's about it.
Oh, good. So, I mean, people could get a Skype session with you or something, or what, like that?
Oh, I don't advertise Skype sessions because look at the problems we've had here.
Yeah.
And we switched it on today, and it worked. The first time we tried, the camera didn't work. The second time we tried, I think your camera didn't work, and then the third time the microphone, there was no sound. Yet today I switched it all on, and it works. And we are well aware in our practice that we get sabotaged.
Well, hopefully the damn thing's recorded. We're recording it on Skype, but that won't include anything with me, which maybe not a bad thing. But it hopefully we're getting the whole thing all in one piece today.
Well, I hope so. That's all I can say. But Skype is, I really do find it pretty annoying.
Well, anyway, I think before your tummy rumbles, I think your dinner's getting cold. Thank you, Michael Lewis, and thank you indeed for all the work you've been doing. And this is very important work you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mars.
Okay. Well, we'll fade to black on that.